So if we look around right now, sometimes we find that the happiness is very difficult to find. I just want to acknowledge the times right now we are living in are still not okay. Maybe in some parts of the world they are fine. We still have uh, this COVID crisis going on. We still have a looming recession, and we still haven't addressed the threat of climate change, which is even a longer term threat. And looking at all that, how we can find happiness in the midst of all the chaos which is going on right now. And if we think about it, then the question comes is, what is happiness in general? I think if we ask people what do they want in life, most of the people will say happiness without even blinking the eye. And if we go asking what does happiness mean for them, I think they will be more into some pleasures, some contentness, a life free and free of worries. Is that the just happiness, what we're looking for? It might be, we don't know. Means this is a happiness which even Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence said that the self-evident truth is to pursue a life of liberty, life and pursue so to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. But if you look into the word, the pursuit of happiness, for me, if I just say the word slowly, the pursuit of happiness, I somehow think that happiness is somewhere out there, an objective thing which we need to go and run and pursue. And why? Why this is so? Is it because in our society we have created a scheme of happiness, something like a societal phenomena or economic status or the what are the accepted pleasures or the modalities of pleasures we could be having? And in fact, if you look around, we are living in that defined or self-defined life. There's a very beautiful movie. I don't know whether you have seen it, The Pursuit of Happiness, uh, in which Will Smith played a role of a single father. And if you look, what was the happiness for him at that moment? There was a scene where he felt really happy and he started crying. It was when he was offered a job as a stockbroker. And at the end of the scene, they say that this is a happy life because he was able to make it in this world. He was able to sell his fortune in a multi-million dollar deal. So he was becoming more of what society has demanded, and everybody just applauded that as an happiness. And we call it the pursuit of happiness. Is it what we are striving for? That reminded me of one of my very good Swiss friends, uh, Diego Hangartner. I can mention his name because we did a podcast together. And he said something which really stuck with me. He's a Swiss pharmacologist, and he used to work in 1980s, end of late 1980s, in a pharma area in Zurich. And if some of you know that we have in Zurich, we have this a place called Needle Plus because Switzerland opened in for rehabilitation drug addicts. They opened that drug people can get the drug addicts so that at least they're getting the new needles and they're not using the infected needles. However, then Switzerland became almost a paradise for the drug addicts. A lot of people from different parts of Europe just came over and and just make their and start selling the drugs here. So when he was there in that Needleplatz, he saw people of all societal and economic backgrounds coming to him asking for the post drugs medicine and all. And it was not only the people, their parents, their sisters were also coming and checking on them in that pharma industry. And he was look he and this pharmacy and the entire Needleplatz, if we see this, it is just based in one of the most beautiful parts of Switzerland where the two rivers, Limmat and Seal, meet. And for him, his thought was, in such a beautiful place, such beautiful bodies of people, why mentally they are rotten that they have to take drugs? In this pursuit of understanding, he was completely overwhelmed. He went to Nepal, and there he saw some people with beautiful eyes full of happiness. And when he looked at their bodies, they were lepers whose body was rotting, but the mind was happy. So, in that case, what is happiness? Is it a physical happiness or is it a mental happiness? I think it's probably both. However, in this world where we think more about the physical well being, we totally underestimate the importance of mental well being. John Milton, in his book Paradise Lost, wrote, "The mind is its own place, and it can create a heaven out of hell and a hell out of an heaven." Then, how can we find mental happiness? I think if we can go back, let's say 2300 years with Aristotle, his entire philosophy is based on happiness. In his book, which is in fact one of the best books in moral philosophy, Nicomachean Ethics, he mentioned the ultimate goal of human existence is eudaimonia. The Greek word eudaimonia can be translated and has been translated into various English words, and it's very difficult to define it. But the words it has been translated into happiness, fulfillment, flourishing. So it is linked to happiness, but it's not the pleasure. It's much more deeper happiness. And if we can continue with eudaimonia as happiness, then he talk about that happiness is finding ourselves. Happiness comes from ourselves. And he also said that it's not about pleasure, wealth, or a good reputation, but it's all about the totality of things which leads to them. So, for in this example, if we take it further, if a person is seeking for wealth, is it the happiness? I mean, Aristotle will say it could be, but if it an end, not a means to an end. So if wealth is itself the end, then for some people it could be the happiness. But if a wealth is a means to, for example, inner peace, then inner peace is the end. But if inner peace is for happiness, then happiness is the final end. So he says, whatever we do, we take it to the level of happiness, one way or another. And the things just before that, which is becoming a means to that particular end, he considered them as virtues. In the example which we have taken, the virtue would be inner peace. For some people, it could be virtue, could be wealth, if that's leading directly to the happiness. So he asked for that self reflection for each one of them and each one of us. How would we define happiness? Is it taking it us somewhere or to the level of self fulfillment? And then the happiness is not a state of being for him. Happiness is the action for the pursuits of our virtues. And if we move from Aristotle and come back to this world, which is the current world, in 2000, a very renowned psychologist on happiness, Sonja Lyubomirsky, she wrote about she wrote a lot about happiness, and she said that she researched happiness for 15 years, and she said that 50% of happiness is genetic and only 10% depends upon external factor. So our life situation, what we are going to find, wealth, inheritance, everything, it's just 10%. She called that as a 40% solution, that the 40% of the happiness depends upon what we do with that. It's an intentional process based on setting activities which we want to follow for the happiness. She mentioned that it's not a stagnant pool, it is a flowing stream where we can participate in creating our own happiness. However, if we look around, this happiness from a Western perspective is still becoming a lot of action. And if we do a complete generalized viewpoint, that the Western philosophy or Western psychology is focusing more on action orientation of happiness, the generalized Eastern philosophy take the completely different route, and they focus on the present, the being, the now in happiness. Andrea Pollard, she called this the two wings of happiness, the Western wing and the Eastern wing. And if we take forward the Eastern wing, let's go to India. In India, I was just thinking, what's the next word to eudaimonia? If I don't want to use the word happy as a translation, I think the word which came to my mind is ananda, which is a state of joy and a complete bliss. In fact, in one of the Indian philosophers, Sri Aurobindo, he wrote that in ancient stages, the true happiness is a form of bliss which comes from renouncing the desire. Renouncing the desire of actions or the fruits, renouncing the desire of the fruits of the action, and just keep on doing what we are doing. And it's not only about doing, it's about being, just being in the present, being in the moment. And these state of bliss in the moment can be attained through different forms of meditative practices, or even the connection with a deeper aesthetic sense like nature, poetry, art, or anything else. It's about suspending our mental judgments or even the mental desires and connecting to something deeper filled with the beauty of life. And from India, if you go to the China, one of the philosophies of Taoism, it for me it's one of the most balanced philosophy on action and inaction. Lao Tzu, the who wrote Tao Te Ching, the Taoist text, he says the way of life is doing nothing through action. The way of life is doing everything through being. In that he was not calling for non-action completely, but he was saying that non-action contains the action of self-awareness. If we become self-aware of ourselves, our values, of what we want to do, from there we can take action. That's the source of happiness. And in these two wings, the Western and the Eastern, I think a lot of happiness could be covered because it just covers the polarities of being and becoming. It covers the polarity of here and now and something beyond here and now. But then the question again comes is what shall we do to get the happiness? And if we look for two or three, like what are the steps? What can we do for the happiness? If it's a process or if it's a being. Very simply, I would just divide it into three parts. The one is gratitude. In our striving for the happiness out there, we sometimes forget what happiness we do have at this current moment. In this current moment, I'm feeling grateful that I was able to go and swim in the lake in such a beautiful weather. And just small gratitudes can re-aliven the cells of happiness in our own being. And it's not only gratitude to ourselves, it's also in appreciating the others. Voltaire wrote that appreciation is a very beautiful thing. It makes what's excellent in others belongs to us. So if we can appreciate the excellence in others, we can totally participate in that. And that's the power of gratitude and appreciation. The second thing for me is the deeper connection to our values. In the world where everybody's talking to values, sometimes even feel cheesy. It's like, what is your values? However, it's very important to connect what are the values, and in Aristotelian terms, what are the virtues which leads us to the happiness. And if we know those values, we'll know our patterns of joy and anger when the values are honored and when the values are stepped upon. And we will know what difference we want to make in the world. That would be happiness. And the last thing for me is connecting to something bigger than what we can see. In some places called the flow state, some places called an ecstatic state. Even though they are short-lived, they bring that level of deeper self-awareness in us. And these states could be achieved, as we discussed before, through either a meditative practice or any type of practice. It could be journaling, it could be poetry, art, hikes, nature, whatever seems right at that moment. And with these three, I would say that for me, it just combines and it covers, at least at a very, very high level, how we can be happy in the midst of chaos. If you can realize that happiness is a choice and happiness is a pursuit, but a pursuit not for things out there, but the pursuit of going inside ourselves and trying to create a new happiness for us. Thank you.